The deafening crack of a gunshot split the Montana air, sending a flock of startled birds into the cloudless sky as Bonnie Fairchild ducked behind a water trough, her heart racing like a runaway stagecoach. It wasn't the first time she'd been shot at, and if she survived this day, it likely wouldn't be the last. The year was 1879, and the small frontier town of Redemption Creek had labeled her hopeless. Long before she'd given them reason to, now they had plenty. "Come out, Fairchild," Sheriff Wallace bellowed, his voice echoing down the dusty main street. "You can't run forever." Bonnie pressed her back against the rough wooden trough, feeling splinters dig into her shoulder blades through the thin fabric of her once fine dress. At 22, she had already lived several lifetimes of trouble. Her fingers tightened around the small leather pouch hidden in her pocket, all that remained of her father's legacy. "I didn't steal anything," she shouted back, her voice steady despite her fear. "That deed is rightfully mine." Another shot rang out, splintering the edge of the trough mere inches from her head. Bonnie flinched as wood chips scattered across her dark auburn hair. She needed to move, and quickly. The livery stable was just across the street, and if she could reach it, there might be a chance to escape. Drawing a deep breath, Bonnie prepared to run when the thunder of approaching hoofbeats made her pause. A rider was coming in fast from the east, a cloud of dust marking his approach. The sheriff and his deputy turned their attention to the newcomer, giving Bonnie the distraction she desperately needed. She bolted, skirts hitched above her ankles, making a desperate dash for the livery. Behind her, she heard shouting, but didn't dare look back. The stable's shadowy interior enveloped her as she slipped inside, breathing hard, searching frantically for a place to hide. "Easy there," a deep voice drawled from the shadows. Bonnie spun around, eyes wide with alarm. A tall man stepped forward, leading a magnificent black stallion. His face was partially hidden beneath the brim of a well-worn Stetson, but she could see enough to know he was a stranger to Redemption Creek. Dust covered his long duster coat, and the spurs on his boots jingled softly as he moved closer. "You look like you're in a heap of trouble, miss," he said, his voice calm but curious. "That's none of your concern," Bonnie replied sharply, backing toward the rear door. "Maybe not," he agreed, pushing his hat back to reveal striking blue eyes set in a sun-weathered face. "But I've never been one to mind my own business when a lady's in distress." The shouting outside grew louder. Sheriff Wallace was organizing a search party. The stranger listened, then turned back to Bonnie. "Name's Lucas Hawkins," he said, extending a gloved hand. "And I believe we ought to make ourselves scarce." Bonnie hesitated. She'd learned the hard way not to trust handsome strangers, but her options were dwindling by the second. "Bonnie Fairchild," she replied, ignoring his outstretched hand. "And I can take care of myself." Lucas Hawkins smiled, a genuine expression that softened his rugged features. "Never doubted it, Miss Fairchild. But two fugitives move faster than one." He patted his horse's flank. "Thunderbolt here can carry us both until we find you a mount of your own." "Who says I'm a fugitive?" Bonnie challenged, even as the voices grew dangerously close. Lucas raised an eyebrow. The sheriff out there with his gun drawn seemed mighty convinced. He swung into his saddle with practiced ease, then extended his hand again. "Trust me or don't, but decide quick." The stable door rattled. Bonnie made her choice in an instant, grasping Lucas's arm and allowing him to pull her up behind him. She barely had time to settle before he urged Thunderbolt through the back door of the stable, then into a gallop that carried them swiftly away from Redemption Creek. As they rode, the wind whipping her hair behind her, Bonnie realized she'd just traded one dangerous situation for another entirely unknown one. Yet somehow, with her arms wrapped around the waist of this mysterious cowboy, she felt a flicker of something she hadn't felt in years. Possibility. They rode hard for several hours, following game trails and stream beds to obscure their tracks. Lucas Hawkins handled his horse with the easy confidence of a man who'd spent most of his life in the saddle. When they finally stopped to rest in a small grove of cottonwoods beside a creek, Bonnie slid to the ground on unsteady legs. "Why did you help me?" she asked, watching as Lucas loosened Thunderbolt's saddle girth to give the horse relief. "Let's just say I know what it's like to be on the wrong side of a lawman's temper," he replied, removing his hat to run a hand through thick dark hair streaked with premature silver at the temples. Up close, she could see he was perhaps 30, with laugh lines around his eyes that suggested he smiled often, though his expression now was serious. "They call me hopeless," Bonnie said, the words falling from her lips before she could stop them. "Back in town. Have for years." Lucas dipped a bandana in the creek and used it to wipe trail dust from his face. "People do love their labels," he said, "especially for those who don't fit neatly into their notions of proper society." "And what do they call you, Mr. Hawkins?" Bonnie asked, sinking down to sit on a sun-warmed rock. "Depends who you ask," he said with a half-smile. "Troublemaker. Drifter. Fool." He shrugged. "None of it matters much to me." Bonnie studied him, trying to gauge what kind of man would risk himself for a stranger. "You didn't answer my question. Why help me?" Lucas met her gaze directly. "Maybe I was just tired of riding alone." "That's not an answer." "No," he agreed. "It's not." He untied his canteen from the saddle and offered it to her. "But it's all I've got for now. Drink. We've still got ground to cover before nightfall." Bonnie accepted the canteen, her fingers brushing his. A curious warmth spread through her at the contact, but she pushed the feeling aside. Getting entangled with a stranger, even one who'd helped her, was a complication she couldn't afford. "Where are we headed?" she asked after drinking deeply. "There's an old trapper's cabin about 10 miles north. We can rest there tonight, figure out our next move." "Our next move?" Bonnie repeated. "I'm not sure we have a we, Mr. Hawkins." Lucas chuckled as he began to tighten Thunderbolt's saddle again. "Miss Fairchild, the moment bullets started flying in your direction, you became my concern, whether you like it or not." "I never asked for your help," she said stiffly. "No," he agreed, "but you took it. And out here, that means something." He mounted Thunderbolt and extended his hand once more. "Coming." Bonnie hesitated only briefly before taking his hand. The trapper's cabin was little more than a one-room shelter with a stone fireplace, but after their long ride, it looked like a palace to Bonnie's tired eyes. Lucas had her wait with Thunderbolt while he checked the cabin first, his hand resting casually on the revolver at his hip. "All clear," he called, emerging from the doorway. "Been abandoned a while, but the roof's sound." While Lucas tended to his horse, Bonnie explored the cabin. A rough-hewn table, 2 chairs, and a narrow bed frame with a dusty straw mattress constituted the only furniture. The fireplace was cold but clean, with a small stack of wood beside it. "It's not much," Lucas said from the doorway, a saddlebag slung over his shoulder, "but it's better than sleeping rough." Bonnie nodded, suddenly aware of how alone they were. She'd been running for so long that trust felt like a luxury she couldn't afford. Yet this man had risked himself for her without knowing anything about her situation. "Why was the sheriff after you?" Lucas asked, setting his saddlebag on the table and extracting provisions, jerky, hardtack, and a small pouch of coffee. Bonnie's hand went instinctively to her pocket, feeling the outline of her father's deed. "He claims I stole something. I didn't. It's rightfully mine, but—" She trailed off, unsure how much to reveal. Lucas nodded, not pressing. "Hungry?" he asked, changing the subject. They ate a simple meal as darkness fell, the fire Lucas built casting dancing shadows across the cabin walls. Despite her exhaustion, Bonnie remained guarded, watching Lucas carefully for any sign of threat. "You can take the bed," he said when they'd finished eating. "I'll sleep by the fire." Bonnie raised an eyebrow. "And I'm supposed to trust that you'll stay there?" Lucas's expression grew serious. "Miss Fairchild, I may be many things, but I'm not the kind of man who'd harm a woman. My mother raised me better than that." He spread his bedroll near the fireplace. "You're safe with me. That's a promise." Something in his tone made Bonnie believe him, though she still positioned a chair against the door before lying down on the musty mattress, fully clothed. Sleep came in fitful bursts, her dreams filled with running and shadowy pursuers. She woke just before dawn to find Lucas already up, cooking something that smelled remarkably like flapjacks on a small iron skillet. "You actually know how to cook?" she asked, pushing herself up and trying to smooth her wrinkled dress. "A man who can't feed himself doesn't last long on the frontier," Lucas replied, flipping a golden brown cake onto a tin plate. "Though I'll admit, these aren't as good as my mother's." Bonnie accepted the plate, surprised by the domesticity of the moment. "Thank you." They ate in comfortable silence as daylight gradually filled the cabin. Bonnie felt herself relaxing slightly, The immediate danger of yesterday giving way to the practical concerns of today. We should reach Silver Pine by afternoon, Lucas said as they cleaned up after breakfast. It's a decent-sized town. You could probably find work there, start fresh. Bonnie shook her head. I can't. Can't or won't? Lucas asked gently. She pulled the leather pouch from her pocket and extracted a folded document. This is why Sheriff Wallace was after me. It's the deed to my father's silver mine, just north of Redemption Creek. When he died last month, Wallace claimed the mine belonged to the town due to unpaid taxes, but that's a lie. My father always paid his debts. Lucas studied the document she handed him, his expression thoughtful. This looks legal to me. It is, Bonnie said firmly. But Wallace has been trying to get his hands on that mine for years. When my father died, she swallowed hard. The sheriff saw his chance. He sent men to seize the mine, but I managed to get the deed first. Been running ever since. And they call you hopeless? Lucas asked, handing the deed back. Bonnie laughed bitterly. That started long before this. After my mother died when I was 12, my father started drinking. I practically raised myself, trying to keep our home together while he gambled away what little we had. The town decided I was just like him, hopeless. But you're not, Lucas said simply. How would you know? Bonnie challenged, though without real heat. Because hopeless people don't fight this hard, he replied. His blue eyes held her steadily. They don't run from sheriffs or hide precious deeds or dream of justice. Something in his quiet confidence made Bonnie's chest tighten. For so long, she'd carried the weight of others' expectations and judgments. To have someone, even a stranger, look at her and see something else felt like rain after a long drought. I need to prove that deed is legitimate, she said. There's a land office in Golden Creek, about 3 days' ride from here. If I can get the deed registered there, even Wallace can't dispute it. Lucas considered this. Golden Creek is heading back toward Wallace's territory. It's risky. I don't have a choice, Bonnie insisted. That mine is all I have left of my father. It's my future. Lucas was silent for a long moment, then nodded. All right. We'll need supplies, and you'll need a horse of your own. We can get both in Silver Pine. We? Bonnie questioned. I never asked you to come with me. No, Lucas agreed with a small smile. But I'm offering all the same. In Silver Pine, Lucas used some of his carefully hoarded funds to purchase a sturdy paint mare for Bonnie, along with supplies for their journey to Golden Creek. While he haggled with the livery owner, Bonnie browsed the general store, acutely aware of how disheveled she must appear after days on the trail. Can I help you find something, miss? The shopkeeper asked, his tone polite but his eyes assessing. Bonnie straightened her shoulders. I need a change of clothes. Something practical for riding. The shopkeeper raised an eyebrow but directed her to a selection of ready-made garments. With the last of her meager funds, Bonnie purchased a pair of sturdy denim trousers, a cotton shirt, and a faded but serviceable jacket. The shopkeeper's wife provided a curtained area where she could change, and when Bonnie emerged in her new attire, she felt transformed. Lucas's eyes widened appreciatively when she met him outside the livery. That's certainly more practical, he commented, helping her adjust the stirrups on her new mare. My father always said a lady should be prepared for anything, Bonnie replied, stroking the paint's velvet nose. He taught me to ride astride when I was 6. Scandalized the entire town. I'm beginning to think Redemption Creek doesn't deserve you, Miss Fairchild, Lucas said with a smile. As they rode out of Silver Pine, Bonnie felt a strange sense of freedom despite the dangers ahead. For the first time in months, she wasn't alone in her fight. The realization was as comforting as it was terrifying. Their journey to Golden Creek took them through some of the most beautiful country Bonnie had ever seen. Sweeping valleys gave way to pine-covered mountains, with crystal-clear streams cutting through meadows dotted with wildflowers. They camped under the stars, taking turns keeping watch, though no pursuers materialized. During those nights, sitting beside small, carefully tended fires, they began to share their stories. Lucas, it turned out, had been a Texas Ranger before something happened that caused him to hang up his badge and head north. What was it? Bonnie asked on their second night, wrapped in a blanket against the mountain chill. Lucas stared into the flames for a long moment. I was ordered to evict a family from their farm. Mexican family, had lived on that land for generations. But some cattle baron wanted it, and he had friends in high places. His jaw tightened. I refused the order. Got into a fight with another ranger who tried to carry it out. After that, wearing the badge didn't sit right anymore. So you've been wandering ever since? Bonnie asked softly. Lucas nodded. 5 years now. Taking odd jobs, moving on when things get stale. He glanced up at her. What about you? What will you do if you secure that mine? Bonnie had asked herself the same question countless times. Run it, she said firmly. My father taught me everything about silver mining. I can hire good men, make it profitable again. She hesitated. And maybe, someday, build something that's truly mine. That's a fine dream, Lucas said, his voice warm with approval. As they talked through those nights, something shifted between them. What had begun as a chance encounter was growing into something deeper, a connection neither had expected to find on the wild frontier. On the morning of the third day, they crested a hill and saw Golden Creek sprawled in the valley below. Unlike many frontier towns that seemed to cling precariously to existence, Golden Creek was thriving, with proper buildings of wood and brick lining its main street. The land office should be near the courthouse, Lucas said as they rode into town, both of them tense with anticipation. Bonnie nodded, her hand going to her pocket to ensure the deed was still safely tucked away. Let's get this done. The land office was a tidy brick building with gleaming windows and a sign proclaiming Western Territories Land Management. Inside, a bespectacled clerk looked up from his ledger as they entered. May I help you? He asked, his tone professional. Bonnie stepped forward, drawing the deed from her pocket. I need to register this mining claim. It belonged to my father, Benjamin Fairchild. He passed recently, and I'm his sole heir. The clerk took the document, examining it carefully. This seems to be in order, Miss Fairchild. However, there is a small matter. He shuffled through some papers on his desk. We received a telegram from Sheriff Wallace of Redemption Creek just yesterday, claiming this deed was stolen property. Bonnie's heart sank. That's a lie, she said firmly. My father owned that mine outright. Sheriff Wallace is trying to steal it from me. The clerk looked uncomfortable. I'm afraid without clear proof of ownership, if I may. Lucas interrupted, stepping forward. From inside his coat, he withdrew a folded paper of his own. I believe this might help clarify matters. The clerk accepted the document, his eyebrows rising as he read. This is a certified bank draft showing payment in full for all tax obligations on the Fairchild mine, dated just before Benjamin Fairchild's death. He looked up at Lucas. Where did you get this? Mr. Fairchild gave it to me himself, Lucas said smoothly. I was passing through Redemption Creek when he took ill. He asked me to ensure his daughter received both the deed and proof of payment, should anything happen to him. Bonnie stared at Lucas in shock, but quickly composed her features. The clerk compared both documents, then nodded. These appear to be in order. I'll register the claim in your name, Miss Fairchild. The processing fee is $5. Lucas produced the coins before Bonnie could speak. Minutes later, they walked out of the land office with official documentation confirming Bonnie's ownership of the Fairchild silver mine. Once they were safely away from the building, Bonnie turned on Lucas. You lied in there. You never met my father. Lucas shrugged. No, but I did wire ahead to the bank in Redemption Creek when we were in Silver Pine. Paid a clerk to check the records and send confirmation of your father's tax payments here. It wasn't a lie that Wallace was trying to cheat you. You did that for me. Bonnie asked, stunned by his foresight. Seems I'm developing a habit of helping stubborn women with mining claims, he said with a grin. Overwhelmed, Bonnie did something she hadn't done in years. She threw her arms around Lucas in a fierce hug. After a startled moment, his arms closed around her, holding her securely. Thank you, she whispered against his chest. Lucas's hand moved gently over her hair. You're welcome, Bonnie. It was the first time he'd used her given name, and it sent a shiver through her that had nothing to do with fear. They found rooms at the Golden Creek Hotel, a luxury Bonnie hadn't expected. After weeks of running and nights sleeping rough, the prospect of a real bed and a hot bath seemed miraculous. We should celebrate, Lucas suggested as they stood in the hotel lobby. There's a decent-looking restaurant across the street. Dinner at 7. Bonnie hesitated only briefly before nodding. I'd like that. In her room, Bonnie soaked in a copper tub filled with steaming water, washing away the dust and anxiety of the past weeks. The hotel had provided a cake of lavender soap, and she used it liberally, scrubbing until her skin glowed pink. After her bath, she faced a dilemma. Her new riding clothes were practical, but hardly appropriate for dinner. A soft knock at her door revealed a hotel made with a wrapped package. "A gentleman asked that this be delivered to you, miss," the young woman said with a curtsy. Inside the package, Bonnie found a simple but elegant blue dress, not new but well made and close to her size. A note in Lucas's bold handwriting read, "Thought you might want something other than trousers for dinner. No obligation." Bonnie smiled, running her fingers over the fabric. The gesture was thoughtful without being presumptuous. Like everything about Lucas Hawkins, it walked the fine line between confidence and respect. When she met him in the hotel lobby that evening, wearing the blue dress with her damp hair arranged in a simple knot, Lucas's appreciative gaze made her cheeks warm. "You look lovely," he said simply. "Thank you for the dress," Bonnie replied. "Though I'm curious how you guessed my size." Lucas offered his arm. "I've spent years observing details, Miss Fairchild. It's a habit that's kept me alive." The restaurant was modest but clean, with crisp white tablecloths and a small vase of wildflowers on each table. They ordered beefsteak and potatoes, with apple pie for dessert. As they ate, Bonnie realized it was the first time in years she'd shared a meal like this with anyone, a real dinner, with conversation and laughter, without fear hanging over her like a shadow. "What will you do now?" she asked as they lingered over coffee. "Keep wandering?" Lucas considered the question. "Not sure. Depends on which way the wind blows, I suppose." "It could blow back toward Redemption Creek," Bonnie suggested, her heart beating faster. "The mine will need experienced hands to run it." Lucas's blue eyes met hers. "Are you offering me a job, Miss Fairchild?" "Maybe," she said, summoning her courage. "Or maybe something more, if you wanted it." The moment hung between them, fragile and potent. Lucas reached across the table, his calloused fingers covering hers. "What if I did want something more?" Bonnie turned her hand beneath his, their palms meeting. "Then I'd say maybe we were both tired of wandering alone." Outside the restaurant, the evening air was cool and sweet with the scent of pine. They walked slowly back toward the hotel, neither rushing the moment. "Wallace won't give up easily," Lucas warned as they paused in the shadows of the hotel porch. "Even with the deed registered, he'll come looking for you eventually." "I know," Bonnie acknowledged. "But I'm done running. That mine is mine, and I'm going to fight for it." Lucas smiled, reaching up to tuck a stray strand of hair behind her ear. "You truly are remarkable, Bonnie Fairchild. When they called you hopeless, they couldn't have been more wrong." "What would you call me then?" she asked softly. Lucas stepped closer, his hand cupping her cheek. "I'd call you brave, determined, beautiful." His voice dropped to a whisper. "I'd call you the woman who made me want to stop wandering." When he kissed her, it felt like coming home to a place she'd never been. His lips were gentle at first, then more insistent as she responded, her hands sliding up to his shoulders. Years of loneliness and struggle seemed to fall away in the warmth of his embrace. They returned to Redemption Creek a week later, riding side by side with their heads held high. Word of their arrival spread quickly, and by the time they reached the main street, a crowd had gathered. Sheriff Wallace pushed his way through, his hand resting on his gun. "You've got nerve coming back here, girl," he growled. Lucas dismounted first, helping Bonnie down before turning to face the sheriff. "Miss Fairchild has every right to be here. Her deed to the mine has been properly registered with the Territorial Land Office." Wallace's face flushed with anger. "That doesn't change the fact that she's a troublemaker. Always has been. Hopeless, just like her daddy." "Enough," Bonnie said, stepping forward. From her saddlebag, she withdrew the official documents. "The mine is mine, legally and rightfully, and I intend to reopen it." "You?" Wallace sneered. "A woman running a silver mine? That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard." "Not as ridiculous as a sheriff trying to steal what isn't his," Lucas countered, his voice carrying to the gathered crowd. "Miss Fairchild has already arranged financing from the bank in Golden Creek. She'll be hiring miners starting tomorrow. Good wages, fair treatment." Murmurs spread through the onlookers. Redemption Creek had fallen on hard times since the mine closed, and the prospect of steady work was appealing. "You can't do this," Wallace sputtered, but his authority was visibly crumbling. "I already have," Bonnie replied calmly. "Now, if you'll excuse us, we have work to do." As they led their horses down the street, several men approached, offering to help with reopening the mine. By sunset, Bonnie had a crew of 10 experienced miners ready to start work the following morning. They spent that night in her father's old cabin, cleaning away months of dust and neglect. As they worked side by side, Lucas told her about his plans to build a proper office at the mine and perhaps expand the cabin into a real home. "You're thinking of staying then?" Bonnie asked, trying to keep her tone casual. Lucas set down the broom he was using and crossed to where she stood. "I told you before I'm tired of wandering. And I think I've found something worth staying for." "The mine?" she teased. "No," he said seriously, taking her hands in his. "You, Bonnie Fairchild. All my life, I've been looking for a purpose, a place where I truly belong. I never expected to find it helping a stubborn woman outrun a corrupt sheriff." Bonnie's throat tightened with emotion. "People will talk, you know. They'll say I'm still hopeless, that we're both fools for thinking this can work." "Let them talk," Lucas replied. "They called you hopeless because they couldn't understand your hope. But I do." He drew her closer. "You're my hope, Bonnie. My home. My heart." When he kissed her, Bonnie finally understood what her father had meant when he spoke of striking silver, that moment of discovery, when everything you've worked for suddenly reveals itself in gleaming possibility. 6 months later, the Fairchild mine was flourishing. Silver ore flowed steadily, employing 30 men from Redemption Creek and surrounding areas. Sheriff Wallace had been voted out of office, replaced by a former miner who believed in fair treatment for all. On a crisp autumn day, with golden leaves swirling around them, Bonnie Fairchild became Bonnie Hawkins in a simple ceremony beside the creek. She wore a new dress of ivory silk, with wildflowers in her hair. Lucas wore a clean black suit, his silver-streaked hair freshly trimmed. As they spoke their vows, Bonnie looked out at the gathered faces, miners and their families, shopkeepers who once shunned her, even a few reluctant friends of the former sheriff. The label hopeless had faded, replaced by successful and respected. That night, in the expanded cabin that had become their home, Lucas held her close beneath a quilt her mother had made years ago. "Happy?" he asked, stroking her hair. "More than I ever thought possible," Bonnie replied truthfully. "You know, for years I believed what they called me, that I was hopeless, that nothing would ever change." Lucas pressed a kiss to her forehead. "And now," Bonnie smiled in the darkness, "now I know better. Hope isn't something others give you or take away. It's something you find for yourself." She nestled closer to her husband's warmth. "Or sometimes, if you're very lucky, it finds you on a day when you're hiding behind a water trough with a sheriff shooting at you." Lucas laughed, the sound rumbling pleasantly against her cheek. "I'll always be grateful I rode into Redemption Creek that day." "So will I," Bonnie whispered, closing her eyes. In the quiet of their home, with the future spread before them like an uncharted territory waiting to be explored, she finally understood the most important lesson of all. No one was truly hopeless who had the courage to keep fighting, to keep believing in possibility. And with Lucas beside her, possibilities seemed endless.